Hi, welcome back to Hydroponics Daily with me, Dr. Russell Sharp. And today I'm going to be talking about my own personal hydroponic fails. Epic fail. Why am I talking about this? Because one, it's just funny. Some of these stories are pretty hilarious. And two, I want to avoid coming across as an expert on every single topic. I'm just giving my opinion on certain topics. Some topics I would consider myself an expert on. Others I'm not, and I'm just doing some research and giving my opinion. And that's to differentiate myself from, certain confidence men who claim to be, the answer to every one of your ills. The likes of John Kempf in America, who sells carcinogenic fertilizers and claims to be a soil biology expert. Or Graham Sate in Australia, who no real qualifications, but again sells carcinogenic fertilizer. So just to prove that I'm not an expert on everything, I am not the Messiah. I'm just a bit of an idiot sometimes. So I've got 7 epic fails that I've done. The last one is an absolute doozy. It's my latest one. And then I've got an extra fail that one of my colleagues did, and that is even more hilarious. So let's go through them. The first one, I've told in a previous episode that I rescued some heirloom tomatoes from a seed bank in Amsterdam, and it was the Blaby Special tomato, and I grew them up and released them to the general public and put a press release out to the Leicester Mercury and other national newspapers that took it up and said it had a very distinctive yellow collar around the top of the tomato that made it distinct from other types of tomatoes. And then the British tomato growers got in touch and said, yeah, that's not a distinct feature. That's just you not growing your plant very well. So it's actually a symptom of just poor quality growing. And so that was not a good look. So if you do get yellow collar or yellow shoulder around on your tomatoes, at the top of the tomatoes, then that's a sign that your pH of your grown media is too high, or your fertigation solution, or you've got very low potassium levels. If you're using a standard hydroponic fertilizer, that won't be an issue because they're chock full of potassium. But the fertilizers I was using back in the day were not. I was using Miracle Grow. So that was bad. The second one is when I was growing all these plants for a study, and then a very esteemed professor called Felix Vackers, who's really high up in Copper now, the biological treatment company. Professor Felix Vackers came into my grow room that he was sharing with me, and he said, Russell, your plants are covered in 2 spotted spider mites. And I says, are they? He says, yeah, look at this webbing. I thought, isn't that just spiders' webs? I didn't know any better at the time. He says, no, look very closely, you'll see them, 2 spotted spider mites. And I was being funny. I said, God, you've got good eyesight, Felix, if you can see 2 spots on the back of them. He didn't find that funny because my plants were infecting his. So yeah, that was an epic fail, and I had to ditch all those plants. It was Choicea tonata, a plant that grows very, very well from all the way from like Florida all the way up to Canada. It's extremely long tolerance of where it will grow in gardens. I was doing a study on ornamental plants at the time. I had to ditch them all because Choicea seemed to be just loved by spider mites even more than other crops. The third fail was when I started growing a rare plant called Prunus africana. I got some seeds, started growing them in the UK. I got 2 really big plants that were nearly as tall as me, so they were about 6'3". And I moved jobs. I moved from Lancaster University to Malton College, and I became a lecturer, and I was teaching students horticulture. And one of these students was an absolute bell end, and in the class, I told him that this Prunus africana plant was very rare, very, very unique, and, it was my pride and joy. And obviously, the next day, this plant had died. So, yeah, something had happened. Don't ever tell anyone how rare your genetics are, how rare your plant is, because you never know what will happen. You could get stolen, could get sabotage, as in this case. And so that was an epic fail. That was epic failure number 3. Epic failure number 4, I've talked about before, that was buying seeds off eBay. And I bought ginseng seeds, grew them for about 3 or 4 years, and then realized they weren't ginseng at all. They were Pennsylvanian ash, or something like that. Completely useless plant. It has no monetary value and is useless in the UK because no one would grow it as an ornamental, and no one cares about Native American trees like Pennsylvanian ash, and certainly was not ginseng. So it does grow in a similar location though. So, but yeah, that was an epic failure number 4. A very expensive failure number 5 was when I was making a lot of seaweed extracts in East Anglia, Norwich. That's on the far east of the UK, and I live in the centre of the UK. And I was making hundreds of thousands of litres of seaweed extracts. We had a factory there, and the actual waste product, the plant cell walls that are the waste product when you're making seaweed extracts, I was finding was really good in my garden. So I was transporting it back home, and it was, the worms were going crazy for it. It was a really good mulch and would last for years in your garden. So it was really good at building up the soil structure, soil biology. So I had a big Peugeot, what do you call it? 2x4, no, like SUV at the time, but with not a great engine. That was the key point here. But it was a big car. And so I would fill it up, all these bulk bags and troughs and buckets, and I'd my car, just load it with this wet seaweed waste. And my car broke down on the A14 where there was no hard shoulder, no rescue area where you could get picked up. And yeah, my car broke down, and that cost me a lot of money to fix the car. So that would class as a hydroponic, or certainly a horticultural mistake. Don't overload your car with mulch and seaweed extract. Number 6, I've talked about before. That was when I tried to grow the world's largest potato. Had it growing for about 10 months in my conservatory, my greenhouse attached to my house. Told everyone I'm growing the world's largest potato, or my family, my niece and nephew said, oh, my uncle's growing the world's largest potato. And when it came to harvest it, I videoed it, and it was just me digging up 600 tiny little potatoes. Epic fail. Okay, this is the last one. And it's the most recent one, is when I decided to control aphids in my grow room. So we're growing blackgrass, which is a weed. It's a major important weed, and we've got loads of plants, blackgrass in our massive grow room. And they got aphids, even though we have inlet filters. Somehow an aphid got in and has propagated, and so all the plants got covered in aphids. So I could spray insecticide, and we did for a while, but the insects seemed to be resistant to even very, very high doses of insecticide. So we tried biological control. That didn't work either. And so I decided, right, aphids cannot survive. Conventional wisdom says aphids cannot survive without a host. They're not like spider mites or thrips that can lay dormant as pupa or as eggs. They have to have a living host. So if I just kill off or take out all the blackgrass plants, leave the compost in the pots, and sow again after 2 weeks, or put new plants in after 2 weeks, then that will control the aphids. I spoke to a entomologist friend of mine, and he said, yeah, as long as you give it a couple of weeks, pump the temperature up in the grow room, then there's nothing for the aphids to live on, and so they will dehydrate and die, and then you can just start again. So yeah, I did that, and then I went into my grow room yesterday. I haven't been even checking my plants, even though on this podcast I say check your plants every day for pest and disease. I just assumed that I'd controlled all the aphids, and this is just a brilliant example of why you just need to control your plants. Look at your plants every day with a microscope, with a hand lens, because they are absolutely covered in aphids. Now, I have no idea what happened there. This shouldn't have happened because there was no green bridge, as it said, for the plants to get from one plant to the other. There's no aphids flying around. There's yellow sticky traps. So these aphids must have laid dormant in the grow media. And that is annoying because I'm going to have to start again. And it's put my project back 2 months. And, it's a big, important project, this one, because, we're trying to look for a biological method of control on a disease that costs billions of pounds every year. So it's a big potential money spinner if it works, this project. And I've completely set it back to step 1 again. So I'm a bit upset with that. I've got to kill off all my plants again and start again, because these blooming insecticidal resistant aphids are back again. Okay, so that was my epic fail number 7, probably my most annoying one. But maybe my anger will fade over the coming weeks, and maybe my spider mite or my yellow collar, my yellow shouldered stupidity will go back to number 1 of all my epic fails. And I said my bonus epic fail is not through me, it's through a colleague, and that was when we were PhD students at Lancaster University, and she was going on holiday for 2 weeks. And so she thought, well, I need to make sure my plants are well fed while I'm away. So she didn't ask anyone to look after them. I think she did ask someone to water them, but she decided she would just feed them. So she fed them pure, undiluted liquid Miracle-Gro as a drench to the roots. And obviously, the next day, someone said, Person X, I know you're on holiday, but all your plants have keeled over and died. All your tomato plants have keeled over and died. She didn't realise, even though she'd done a degree in biology and she was doing a PhD in plant science, that pouring pure, undiluted fertiliser on your plants was not a good idea. So that was an epic fail. If you've got any epic fails, then please do get in touch. I'd love to hear them. I'll happy to share them. We could compile a list and I could share them anonymously, or I could give you a shout out if you want a shout out. So that's been Hydroponics Daily for today, Saturday, the 12th of April. Thank you very much for listening as always, and see you tomorrow for a Sunday edition. Thank you.